again to the Dwarven Tavern. I am your host, Lyric, and today we are doing another beginner's video on equipment. What it is, how you use it, what it's there for, the limitations that your character might come across, etc., etc. So, beginning this video, what is equipment? Equipment is basically anything that your character carries, anything that they use. This includes their weapons, their armor, even their clothing, because of course, you need to remember that your traveler is going to be stuck with that particular outfit for the rest of their journey. If you don't pack extra clothing, that could be a problem. So, it's all-encompassing on what your character has on their person. That's clothing, jewelry, weapons, shields, the like, food even. That's a lot of things that's something that a lot of people forget about is food. You can't just expect to wander out into the middle of nowhere and then find a tavern or an inn at your earliest convenience. That's a nice DM like myself would do that for you, but there are some not nice DMs out there who would make you starve. So, getting to it, equipment, this is going off of Dungeons & Dragons 3.5, as I have the player's handbook here for my guidance, and also I'm going to be using Pathfinder for a few examples, which is right here, just to locate where certain things are in the book in case you are curious about them. So, the reason that I'm using Dungeons & Dragons 3.5 so frequently is because that's the one that I grew up with. That's the one that I played, not necessarily first. I think I actually cut my teeth on 2nd edition, but I did grow up playing 3.5. I taught 3.5 for my friends who were getting into Dungeons & Dragons, so I do know it like the back of my hand. However, that being said, I did just have to look up the carrying capacity on which page that was, because it's not in the equipment chapter. And I have a very big problem with that, because where else should the carrying capacity be other than the equipment chapter? It's apparently in the adventure chapter, and I don't like that, because it's like 100 pages difference. Pathfinder is very similar in that the carrying capacity is not on the same page, yet it is only like 5 pages away from the equipment. Like, they're in different chapters, but it's easier to find than in 3.5, so I do like that. Maybe in 5th edition it's different. I assume it's different. I assume it's different with all RPGs, but I will be using 3.5 and Pathfinder as my example. The equipment chapter in 3.5 is page 111, and the carrying capacity is on page 161, while in Pathfinder, I'm not quite sure exactly what page the equipment on, but the carrying capacity is like 5 pages afterwards on page 171, so I think it's like 160 something. They're pretty much the same thing. You can find pretty much the same equipment in the 2 different RPGs, but I would have a look for myself, just to make sure that I'm not forgetting something, not missing something out, or anything like that. So, equipment has several different uses. Obviously, pretty much everything that your character has on their person is equipment, so it's pretty much anything that you can think of in material possession. Equipment can be a bag, it can be, equipment is what your character is equipped with, and that can be, literally everything that I just mentioned. So that includes the stuff that holds those things, such as bags and bedrolls and tents. So there are everything that your character has is equipment. So the uses for this equipment is pretty much self-defined in the books. It is things that you use to carry stuff. It's things you use to clothe yourself with. That's something that was very hard for me to say. It's things that your character even fights with, because weapons and armor and all that stuff is considered equipment, even though it doesn't go under the equipment spot on your character sheet. It goes on the very distinct spot of the character sheet. So they all have different uses, they all have different things, and sometimes the character sheet outlines specific details for those equipments, such as jewelry that has magical components, and where that is on your being, where it has possession on self and then possession in a bag or something. And it really just depends on the character sheet that you have, if it has those things laid out for you. If you want a more concise character sheet, chances are they're not going to have that specific detail. But if you want an in-depth character sheet, you know, the 4 or 5 page character sheets that are, you know, extravagant in their detail, chances are they have that type of possession table that you can use for your equipment, but it really just depends on which one you get. So now we're getting into the more specific details of what equipment is, and those are what isn't considered equipment, what isn't covered in the book, I guess would be a better topic. What stuff does your character have, does your character need, that isn't defined in the book? Well, in the books, it gives a very specific, detailed list of things that your character could potentially have. It keeps the adventurer in mind with tidbits of those who may stay in, I don't know, a village or city or something like that. There are specific books designed for seafaring travelers. There are specific books going for the more light-loaded characters. Which we'll get into carrying capacity in a little bit, but there are books pretty much for everything that your character could be. You would have to look into those, but they are there and they are available for you, and all you have to do is just search and you will find them. Like the books Songs and Silence, or Silence and Song, I think it's Songs and Silence, is a book about rogues and bards and more specific parts of their classes that they can go in more depth with in that book, including equipment. So, like, for example, a bard might have certain instrumental related equipments, like a cloth for cleaning their flute, or extra strings for their banjo. It really just depends on the character and what they have with them. They do have things as simple as a thieves kit, a thieves toolkit in Pathfinder and 3.5 that you can use, but then there's also things that they don't take into consideration, such as, I don't know, a grappling hook, or any sort of lockpick, which I'm sure in the Thieves Toolkit they have lockpicks, but you know, maybe you have an upgraded advanced version of the Lockpick 2000, or the Skeleton Key 2000, done by Hitchcock Pennywhistle, who is the greatest rogue in the area. My books fell over. So there are things that the book does not cover. It does give a specific outline of what your characters could and potentially have, and a lot of my characters, that's all they need is what's on that list. It does kind of cover all of your bases, but if you want more specific stuff, you could, you know, consider it and use the stats of the material that's already in the book, or you can come up with new stuff with your DM, because as always, Lyric's #1 rule, communicate and talk to your DM. The next thing that's important about equipment, probably the most important thing about equipment that gets overlooked all the time, is its weight. So, your character is a person. Your character is someone physical. It's someone who has strength and constitution. They get tired, they get fatigued, their muscles get worn, and especially if they're new to traveling, they're probably not used to traveling, and therefore it does wear them out faster if they have more stuff. If your traveler is a more advanced traveler, then they probably are used to carrying more things, and therefore their strength is probably a bit higher, or their constitution is a bit higher. So you have to keep those things into consideration if your character has a low constitution, a low fortitude, a low strength and dexterity. Like, those physical attributes of your character do help with what you are choosing for your equipment. If you are a new traveler, for example, if you're a cleric, let's say, let's use my character, Itimsale Tilasor, who is my cleric bard, my wonderful Claude of Shellen, of the Pathfinder role-playing game. She is very new to traveling, and she is very fine-featured. She is an elf, and she's not used to traveling. She's very flimsy, if you would. And she doesn't have a lot of stuff on her. She's got her extra cleric robes, some food rations, a bag to hold it with. I always make my characters have rope. Like, it's metagaming on my part, but I know that rope is useful, and she already used her rope to help a companion. So, it's always useful to have rope with your characters. It's just like, if I'm playing in a game, that's the only thing I'm going to metagame, is that my character has to have rope because they know better. So, the one time that I did not have a character have rope, it was a dire situation, and they didn't die, but they definitely paid a price. So, Etempsala has a lot of stuff that, she doesn't have a lot of gold, for example, because as a cleric, she donates it to whatever monastery that she comes across. Even though she is a very devout follower of Shellen, she is not a very, picky religious person. She's not saying, you know, Shellen is the one goddess of the pantheon that I believe in, and all others are second rate. She's saying, Shellen, the goddess Shellen, is the goddess of love, and she loves all of the other gods, and she's very generous, and she loves everything. So I have to love everything as well. So my gold is your gold. And that's her type of personality. So she doesn't have a lot of stuff because she does donate a lot of her things. The only reason that she has her robes is because that was given to her from her monastery. Or her church, I should say. I'm not quite sure what Shellen... I think she would have church. Statistics I will figure out later. But anyway, Etempsala doesn't have a lot of equipment because that's the type of person she is. It's also because that's the type of person she is. She might be, you know, not very materialistic, but at the same time, she can't be materialistic because she can't hold all that stuff. Like, she may have a home, she may have a place that she's lived all her life, and she just left it on a whim to spread the gospel of Shellen, but that doesn't mean that she's gonna take her whole house with her. So it is important to keep in mind that the characters themselves can and will depend on that carrying capacity, which, if you're not sure, I mentioned this before, but if you're not sure what the carrying capacity is, on Pathfinder's lovely core rulebook, you can find it on page 171, and on Dungeons & Dragons 3.5 edition, you can find it on page 161, which is very cool that they're so close together. But I don't know what specific page it is on for 5th edition. You'll have to look at that yourselves because you probably have the book. I do not, so please look at that and let me know in the comments what it is. What to keep in mind when you are gaming when it comes to equipment. The two biggest things that I can think of off the top of my head, there might be more, and if you find more, please comment below. I'm always happy for suggestions. But the first one is that you can get more equipment. You can lose equipment, and this includes gold and copper and silver and platinum all in one, the monies of the game, or even dollar bills if you play in D20 Modern. So, I don't know what that accent was, but there you go. Money and, you know, food and stuff that is not necessarily constant, it's temporary things, can be fluctuating throughout the game. They can change, they can go away, they can come back, you can get money with every encounter, you can spend money with every encounter. So it's very important to have the weight in mind as well as the item itself, because when it fluctuates, so does your character's ability to carry it. So if your character is getting more on the heavy load, or more the hefty side, their speed is decreased. If they get on the more hefty side of their packaging, then they probably they get tired quicker. They want to stop more. They want to get some sort of war horse or pack mule to help them out. Probably not a war horse. That's a little extreme. So, unless they loot a whole dungeon, and then they might need a war horse to carry all that stuff. But that's specifics that is on a whole different video. But anyway, a character would try to keep those things in mind, even though you as a player may not. So, for example, if you are playing a hobbit, you probably don't want to take too much gold, even if you are a rogue, because there's only so much that a hobbit can carry in comparison to their human companion, which they might want to weasel their way into that human's mentality and say, hey, So we can split this gold later, but will you carry it all? Because I'm tiny, and I will open the doors for you, because that's what I'm good for. And then you can slit your companion's throat at the end of the night. That rogue is obviously chaotic evil, but I digress. So keeping the weight is important, especially when you are looting, when you're going through dungeons, when you are going through cities. You want to make sure that you are not carrying too much. You want to make sure that you're not forgetting that your character has a weight load, that they may spend enough money or sell enough stuff that weight is no longer relevant to their character. They suddenly get a speed increase. They suddenly are able to go on longer treks because, hey, I got rid of that bundle of fabrics at the last store, or I sold the heaviest weapon that I had, which was a hand and a half sword. So it really is important to keep in mind, because your character would benefit from it either way, whether you have to keep in mind, well, I can't buy anymore because my character can't carry anymore, or I should sell more stuff because if I sell at least 10 more pounds of things, my speed increases back to 30, and I'll be able to have better moves in combat. So it's always important to keep that in mind. I myself am very bad for not knowing what my carrying capacity is, so I always I go low bottom for it. I always shoot too low for what the carrying capacity is, and then I realize my character can carry about 50 pounds more. So I am keeping my character's abilities, their physical attributes, in mind subconsciously. So weight fluctuation is important. You have to keep it in mind. Equipment itself is important because it's not just what your character has, it's what they use in battle. And characters, may want things that are not covered in the book. So talk to your DM about what your character can have and what they can't have, because tower shields depend on travelers. So you probably shouldn't have a tower shield if you're a lone traveler or far lane. So probably shouldn't do that. So talk to your DM. Equipment is important. And keep in mind the weight fluctuations and the pricing, because money is important with your character as well. If you're like me and not worry about money until the game has started, then you might let your characters get away with a little more than they're supposed to. But at the same time, it's for the good of the game, in my opinion. And they can get rid of it later in game if it's so necessary. So those are my 2 cents. If you have your 2 cents, please pay them to the bartender and the comments below. And I look forward to reading your suggestions if you have any beginners video suggestions, or if you just want to talk about what's talked about in this video, I'll be happy to hear it. So on behalf of the entire cast and crew of the Dwarven Tavern, I am Lyric with your beginners videos as always, and I wish for you to want for nothing but adventure, and at first I feared it, then I charged. Thank you guys for watching, and we will see you next time.
Let the games begin, let the dragons in, play the game.